Hi guys, I'm Sheena from the SportsReportGirl.com here with In the Crease, a recap of the top stories from the National Hockey League. Obviously, the big story this week was the start of the Stanley Cup Finals, a rematch of last year's series between the Detroit Red Wings and the Pittsburgh Penguins. So far, it's looked more like a repeat than a rematch, with Pittsburgh losing the first two games in Detroit, but I still like the Penguins. From the start of the playoffs, Pittsburgh was my dark horse to win it all. If they can even up the series at home, then I would expect them to carry that momentum back to Detroit, where they will steal Game 5 and win the Cup at home in Game 6. That was my pick before the series began, and I'm sticking with it. Of course, if the NHL were willing to suspend Evgeny Malkin the way they should, then my prediction would likely be different. But, they didn't suspend Scott Walker, so how can they suspend Malkin, right? Moving on, Commissioner Gary Bettman offered his annual State of the NHL address last weekend. Many topics were discussed, including league revenues, steroids, and whether the Phoenix Coyotes would soon become the Hamilton Hound Dogs. But a topic I found of particular interest was the NHL's plan to raise the profile of the sport by playing the first two games of the finals on consecutive days. They hadn't done this in many decades and thus felt it would create a buzz. But mostly, it was done because NBC wouldn't carry games during the week, as those time slots are deemed too valuable for the NHL. Regardless of the reasoning or rationale, the plan worked. The overnight Nielsen ratings for the first two games beat out the competition on Fox, CBS, and ABC. But here's the thing. While the numbers are encouraging, they could be much better. The NHL doesn't need a new cable network. They can grow with Versus, much like the NBA has with TNT. But what they really need to do is shift the start of the regular season forward by 2 months. Hockey suffers primarily because it's always overshadowed by other sports. Their season coincides entirely with the NBA season, a sport that occupies many of the same arenas. Also, by starting in early October, it competes with most of the NFL season, and by the time the playoffs get underway, Major League Baseball is stealing all the headlines with their opening day festivities. Thus, the NHL should get underway in December and conclude with the Stanley Cup Finals in late July or early August. Because after the NBA crowns their champion, what else is there on the sports calendar from mid-June to early September but baseball? That's a vacuum which hockey could fill and, as a result, become a much more popular sport. Okay, enough of my rant on how to fix hockey. In other news from around the league, the Montreal Canadiens hired Jacques Martin as their new coach on Monday. Martin had been serving as general manager of the Florida Panthers and has previous coaching stints with both Florida and Ottawa. Bob Gainey, who took over for the fired Guy Carbonneau, returns to his duties as the Habs GM. Another new hire from the weekend was Joe Nieuwendyk, who takes over as general manager in Dallas, replacing the not-so-dynamic duo of co-general managers Brett Hull and Les Jackson. Nieuwendyk, Hull's teammate 10 years ago when the Stars won the Stanley Cup, was previously the special assistant to Brian Burke in Toronto. Hull will become executive vice president, and Jackson resumes his prior duties as director of scouting and player development. And somewhere, Sean Avery can still be heard laughing his ass off. Okay guys, that is it for this edition of In the Crease, but don't forget to leave your comments, and if you like this show, be sure to subscribe and tell a friend. Okay, until next time, bye-bye.